Okay, in this video, I want to get into the subject of the white sun a little bit more, um, specifically to address the idea that is becoming a little bit more prevalent now uh, regarding the possibility that the sun is artificial. And this is a response, I think, just as this post that I did here, it's an attempt to explain through circumstantial evidence some sort of plausible explanation for why the sun has obviously turned white. Um, as I say here, I was born in 1982, right? I'm 33. So I would imagine that, if you were born, somebody that was born in, like, say, 2001, I mean, by the time they were 10, it's already 2011, and that's when the white sun really, around that time, 2011, 2012, that's when the trend really started to accelerate. So, someone that is, so let's see, if they were born in 2001, that would be, they'd be like 16 years old now, 15, 16. So anybody that age, when you bring this subject up to them, they're not necessarily going to understand what you're talking about because um, they just weren't around to see it. Like those of us who are a little bit older were. I have, as I say here, I have really like vivid memories of the yellow sun. I mean, I used to watch it from like midday till it's set every 6 days a week. Like and especially since it was in a sports context, um, I have really vivid memories of like things that happened on the field, and I can remember like every aspect of those plays. And part of that is the yellow sun in the sky, right? Um, so there, in attempting to explain this, I don't fault anyone for considering the possibility that, okay, have they put a fake light source up in the sky that is mimicking our sun, and that's why it's white. Um, but at the same time, I come out on the other side. Even considering that possibility, I still come out on the other side of, I tend to believe this is a natural phenomena. Um, well, it could be a combination of artificiality and a natural phenomena, um, which we'll go to right now. So this is a video from SS52 with the question, we may have an artificial sun in our sky. And I left a comment on this post, kind of along the lines of what I was just saying. While there is no question that the yellow sun has shifted into a white F-type main sequence star, determining a plausible explanation for this change is heavily speculative. Was the yellow sun replaced with a techno-artificial white sun? Possibly. Did the yellow sun naturally shift its frequency as a part of some natural cycle of cosmic seasons? Possibly. Um, Either way, this discussion puts a different spin on the concept of Project Bluebeam, right? Like um, UV Bluebeam. The ultraviolet index has surged in conjunction with the sun's color shift. They even changed the measuring scale, and most cultures have myths surrounding a quote unquote shift of the ages, making it beyond the realm of coincidence that the sun's shift from yellow to white began shortly after 2001 and greatly accelerated post 2012. Combined with the weakening slash changing magnetic field, such a shift seems like an obvious potential explanation for Earth slash climate changes and species die-offs. Um, and yeah, so just in this little sentence right here, you can tie in the entire fake global warming climate change narrative, right? That would make perfect sense to put that out there right now to coincide with this shift, right? And it's so I won't read the rest of this, but the SS52 responded with the idea of, well, oh, I thought the sun had turned white due to the nanoparticulates in the atmosphere from the chemtrail spray. And I thought that was a good observation. And my response to that was, yes, that is definitely another possibility. The rise of chemtrails accompanied, oh, just by the way, the reason I brought this comment up here instead of just clicking the reply is because I have some sort of old version of Firefox that isn't compatible anymore. So I can't view all the replies in this browser anymore. And I've just been too lazy to update it. But so I say, yes, that is definitely another possibility. The rise of chemtrails accompanied the shift of the sun post 2001. The retroactive official narrative from NASA.gov is that the sun has always been white. We just perceive it as color due to how the sun's wavelengths refract through the atmosphere, which is also how they explain the darker orange reddish sunrise slash sunset. But if this explanation were true, movies from the 80s and before would not have copied the yellow sun we were seeing from the ground at the time and made the sun's color in outer space yellow, Superman 4, for example. Rather, they would have shown a white sun in space, just like the digital paintings from NASA now show. As if true, this would have been common knowledge in 1987. And I was referring to this part of my post right here, where in Superman 4, they portrayed the sun in this soft yellow way in outer space. Um, and you can compare and contrast that with this image from NASA, which is a painting and a digital painting, and I'll show why that's the case later. But they compare it with this image that says, "Oh yeah, look, it's always looked like this. This is how you see it now." And this just never happened. um, and the reason that is significant, especially about Superman 4, is because when you go down to Back to the Future Part 2, they actually, Back to the Future Part 2 was in 1989, right? So if it was, let me put it this way. In 1987, when they made Superman 4, because we supposedly had already been to the moon and been in outer space, there would have been reports of, oh yeah, the sun is actually white. Oh, we were just seeing it in yellow from the ground because it was refracting through the atmosphere in this way that our eyes perceived as yellow. But really, it's always been white, right? Um, but that's not what the makers of Superman 4 did. They showed us this yellow sun in outer space that mimicked the sun we were seeing from the ground at the time. So they would have, if this was true, it would have been common knowledge to everyone at the time, and they would have showed the sun as white in space, right? They would have shown it like NASA did in that image above. And then you get to Back to the Future Part 2. This is in 1989, and they don't mimic that yellow sun. They show the sun that we see now. And this, remember, this is 2015, the year, right? And I don't need to tell everyone how encoded Back to the Future is with 9/11 and other events like that in general. So it makes perfect sense that they would. If you want to claim Zemeckis actually was behind this film, which he may or may not have been, but this is kind of a wink and a nod to, oh yeah, we know this is going to happen. So again, you're going back to the same question of, well, okay, maybe they knew it was going to happen, but did they know it was going to be an artificial sun, or did they just know that this was going to be a natural shift that transpired? And then of course there's future examples, or future Back to the Future. There's other examples of them sort of foreshadowing this whole thing, like the way that we transitioned from a DVD to a Blu-ray disc. And if you go down, oh, I already passed it. And if you go to the actual technology behind the DVD and the Blu-ray, you see that it went from this longer red wavelength to reading this shorter blue or violet wavelength, which when you go to the actual color spectrum that our eyes can see, you have the red on this side, which is closer to the infrared that we can't see, And then you have the blue slash violet light on this side of the spectrum, which is closer to the ultraviolet wavelengths that we can't see. So I mean, it's really amazing how limited of a perception that we have. So, so you can see how the yellow orange is closer to the infrared, which would be the red infrared wavelength of the DVD, to the upgraded blue ultraviolet nature of the Blu-ray disc, right? And they called it the Blu-ray disc for a reason. And they even had this promotional disc, which looks exactly like the sun does now when you look at it. Um, and what it's high definition content, right? It is you are perceiving the image in a different way, and that is a metaphor for what is taking place with our eyes and the sun and our ability to perceive. It's kind of it was kind of likewise foreshadowed in this Obama campaign art from '08. Change we can believe in, and they've got this white sun coming out of the red into the blue UV spectrum, right? And the UV measuring has coincided with this change too. Well, yeah, and then of course you have the whole 2012 idea of the shift of the ages, right? And the age of transitions. Um, and I mean, this is getting into stuff that we can skip over for now, but I just wanted to go to, right, and look how Kubrick displayed the Star Child in the same color scheme. Um, but then you go down here to the way that they foreshadowed it with the change of the light bulbs as well. We went from this soft yellow incandescent glow to this harsh blue UV light. Well, of course, this is an artificial light, so it's a little harsher than the sun, but you can see the idea they were going for there. And then, of course, you have the blue UV glow, artificial, of the television and the computer and the screen in general. Um, so going back to here, we just need to explain this at this point, right? Just using the circumstantial evidence that we have. So anyways, to your point, some will use this official explanation to state that the sun has always been white and changes in the atmosphere have allowed its quote unquote natural white color to become more visible. From here, there are a couple of possibilities regarding this obviously whitewashed cover story. If the effect is artificial, then the geoengineering program's atmospheric manipulation is causing the sun to appear white via nanoparticulate reflection and likewise somehow trapping more UV radiation inside the Earth. If the effect is natural, then the geoengineering program's atmospheric manipulation is most likely designed in part to regulate accompanying Earth climate changes and likewise block the sun's full rays from reaching a significant portion of the world population at any given time. Which is why a lot of people will note that much of the chemtrailing activity, it takes place over metropolitan areas, and if you're in more remote places, it's less pronounced, which would kind of reinforce that sort of idea. But of course, they're also doing it to control the weather, and it's kind of like it's a function of where the jet streams are too, and where they need to lay down the clouds and steer weather in that way. So that's not going to be a hard fast rule, but in general, like I think there might be a little something to that. And then on top of that, and the idea of Project Bluebeam being something maybe a little more nuanced than a staged alien invasion. Well, then you have the Wi-Fi fields, the EMF, the Gwen towers, the cell towers. You have this electromagnetic soup that is likewise in addition to blocking out the sun for a majority of the year, then you have our own electromagnetic fields being fucked with in a way where we can't resonate properly with the Schumann resonance. So that's why I say perhaps it is some combination of both, right? A sub question is just really how advanced the geoengineering program really is, as there have been rumors of invisible chemtrails. Have they reached a certain level of homeostasis within their artificial atmosphere such that it is now self-sustaining, like a quote-unquote river floating in the skies? I think this would have to be the case to justify one, because there are non-chemtrailed, clear, quote-unquote clear skies where the sun still appears blindingly white. This might also explain why quote-unquote real clouds now appear so much lower to the ground than before, essentially being pushed down by the artificial atmosphere. Hard to say, really, if only they would just man up and tell us the truth. So, I think what I was really just trying to convey in this comment is, I think it's totally within the realm of possibility that this could be some sort of artificial sun. However, I would not tend to come out in favor of that theory in light of all of the circumstantial evidence. I tend to believe that this is more of a natural phenomena. But like I say here in one, that doesn't mean that the geoengineering program isn't having some sort of effect as far as making the sun appear so blindingly white. That doesn't mean there hasn't been some sort of natural shift as a part of a shift in the cosmic seasons, as it were, because that just makes sense. I mean, we have seasons on Earth. I see no reason why there wouldn't be that sort of truth to as above, so below, like there would be a sort of cosmic season taking place with our own sun, acting on a scale that is above the seasonal scale of the lower ecosystems. So yeah, there might be some sort of artificial effect happening here in addition to some sort of natural change, because I mean you have to consider all of the ancient myths regarding a shift of the ages, in addition to all of the rhetoric, which is mostly propaganda. Well, not necessarily false propaganda, but misconstrued propaganda by all of these mystery traditions, which focus on the idea of the age of Aquarius and the golden age, right? Where they've been talking about this for hundreds of years. But all of the symbolism behind 9/11 and the new year on the Coptic calendar was about shifting us in a direction that would not benefit us as a part of this natural seasonal cosmic change, right? I mean, because just look at 9/11. That's exactly what they did. That changed. There's never, people are waiting for the next 9/11. I have no doubt that they might do some shenanigans, staging some event where ISIS, blows up a dirty bomb, and it'll be a staged event in the same way that 9/11 was, where I'm sure they'll blow some shit up, and then they'll have all of their, staged propaganda surrounding that, where they create this narrative that can never be unraveled in any sort of transparent way, because there'll be so many conspiracy theories already worked into what really happened, and those people will just fight with each other, and no one will be able to understand the larger context taking place. But 9/11 is just on a scale that is, I don't think it will ever be duplicated, because, and how could they, now that we have been so heavily placed into the digital age, there's just no, and there's so much more scrutiny and so much more focus on deconstructing these events as they happen. I don't see how they could possibly get away with an event on that scale, like they did with 9/11, which was before everyone had camera phones and smartphones or whatever, or before anyone even knew they were doing all of this stuff, as far as staging the events go. So that's just a little background on where I'm coming at this analysis from. And so in this video, SS52 links to a couple patents that are discussing solar simulators, right? And then there's a couple videos in here too where people are discussing the idea of the artificial sun. Excuse me. So I we'll go to the patents. I think this is the one. This is the first one, solar simulator, and this was in filed in 1963. I remember I read this already, but it's kind of a difficult read. It uses interesting language, but so this is for a solar simulator. Although other solar simulators are known, the present invention is believed to constitute a notable achievement in that it simulates solar radiation by means of a system which is not overly complex or costly, and which can utilize a more intense radiation source to give a greater area of simulated radiation per device. So just break down that sentence. A more intense radiation source to give a greater area of simulated radiation per device. When you whenever you're looking at a patent, you got to come down and look at what the patent has been referenced by, as far as who's building on that patent and where the technology is going. And if you look at them, it's mostly things that are in no way indicative of a fake sun, right? Because even though it says sunlight simulator, when you go actually read what this is talking about, it's talking about very narrow applications and small scale things that are designed to simulate sunlight, so that they can run tests, right? Like one of the patents, let's see, a virtual light source. I think this was the other main one that SS52 linked to. Yeah, because this one is from 1961. So we'll come back to this one. But this is just another summary of it. The present invention was developed in connection with a sun simulator system for use with an outer space environmental test chamber and is believed to be especially advantageous for such application. It is also expected, however, that the invention will find advantageous application in other cases where similar design requirements are to be considered. Right. So this is for an outer space environmental test chamber. They're developing a solar simulator, and if you go, one of the other related patents is, it was designed for NASA to test the solar arrays that they have on the shuttles, which supposedly power them, and that's a whole other issue. But we'll save NASA for another time. But you can see it's a very limited application. Let's see, this was from the 1980s, right? So this is exposure to UV radiation is a leading cause of adverse skin conditions, including skin cancers. Exposure is usually from sunlight. Apparatus for testing skin reaction to various UV intensities is therefore desirable to obtain empirical data. Generally, known apparatus include an artificial light source that provides a single beam focused upon the subject. It is desirable, however, to have the ability to simultaneously test skin reaction to various intensities of UV radiation. The present invention is directed to an apparatus that provides this function, right? So it's another limited test apparatus where they need this sunlight simulator to do the test that they're doing, right? And this is another one for a large area pulse solar simulator where they want to illuminate the surface of a large solar array, such as one 20 feet by 20 feet in area, which is not big at all, from a distance of about 26 feet with an essentially uniform intensity field of pulse light, enabling the solar array to be efficiently tested with light that emulates the sun, right? So this is another small test of a solar array, and solar arrays are just like you see on solar panels. So this is a limited test of that sort of thing, and they need the artificial light source to test them before they get in this operational phase, right? I mean, that just makes sense. That's how engineers work. And let's see, this one was from 2009. And yeah, so this is another similar thing that was in the test. So you can kind of see, and the reason that I'm bringing these up to 2009 and 2012 is that you can see that while they've progressed this technology, it's still being used, in things like headlight systems, and things like that. Well, actually, it doesn't say that here, but that must have been another one that was doing that. But I mean, you can just see like illuminating device for a projector, scanning telescopes. So this technology is not, you would have to get into ideas about a secret space program, which is dubious at best because, well, we'll get into that right now, I guess. There was another video that was linked from SS52 from this channel, Richie from Boston, and well, we'll start at the beginning. And this person shows this hexagonal light, which looks like it's about as big as a stadium light, really. I mean, this is something that would light a stadium. And from this one picture, goes on to say this exists while being labeled telescope. Just as the Pope uses a condom, it's true. um, let's see, where was that? Oh yeah, so this is either a terrible psyop idea or we have luck on our side, and this puzzle piece is sent in space to team up with a bunch of equally weird hexagons to form a big hexagon that pretends to be our sun around the world. So just think about what this person is proposing here, that they've taken a bunch of these, put them together based on these patents that I just went over that are not anywhere on this scale, and they've somehow put them together in the sky at an altitude that will mimic the old yellow sun very convincingly. That just seems way beyond the pale and unlikely. And so that's what I was saying. You'd have to get into ideas of the breakaway civilization and the secret space program, where like they have, which I mean, there's definitely some truth to the idea that the government has technology that is just far advanced beyond what will be commercially available to us. I mean, that goes without question. But going back to this part, well, I should first say he shows these pictures of like trying to say that the sun is hexagonal, right? And then finishes it with this view from space. So, going back to SS52's channel, you have to use a little common sense about what you're saying in other contexts, because this channel does a lot of good videos on how, really kind of showing how the rockets are not going above a certain altitude in the atmosphere. It's just not capable, and that they're just not capable of it. And that really, that's something that I also believe is taking place. Now, many people would say that it's the firmament, that it's some solid barrier, but I think that it's just an energetic barrier that surrounds the Earth that cannot be penetrated. And that's why the rockets can only go a certain height before they have to fall back down. And of course, there is the potential for low Earth orbit, to where the actual shuttle can throw the rockets off and then orbit in low Earth. But I said it again, orbit in low Earth. But that's the real reason that they could never go to the moon or get so far into outer space, was because of this energetic barrier that is, well, just think of it like a cell in your body is, it's designed to keep the contents of the inside of it from escaping. So your cell has this energetic barrier that prevents, that sort of like traumatic event from taking place, right? So it just, as above, so below, it just makes sense that, like the cell in your body, the Earth would have a similar barrier. And scientists have quantified this into like, electromagnetism and, radiation belts and things like that. But so going back to what I was saying about the artificial sun, I don't see how it would be possible for them to put something of this size, because for them to get something of this size into outer space, like this person is showing here, I mean, even if this is low Earth orbit, that seems very dubious to me. That they would have the capability to get something like that up there. And you have to remember that the sun is big, man. Like this lit up, this stadium light lit up, even if you combined, I don't even know, like 100 of them together, like that's going to be a blip in the sky. Because the thing of it is, like, he compares, or he or she, I don't know, but at one point he compares, excuse me, he compares this hexagon to the actual size of the sun. But you got to remember that this is huge, and but because of perspective, when you're looking up at it in the middle of the day, it looks like it's the same size as this light. So you make the mistake of thinking that it would just be as simple as doing that. No, that sun is huge, and it would take something gigantic, which I don't know how they would even hide the construction of. I mean, who knows, man? But again, you'd have to go to some like kind of extreme theory, which, just because it's extreme doesn't mean it's not taking place. I'm definitely open to it, but you'd have to go to some extreme theory where they're taking, they have this secret space program where they can basically move a Death Star equivalent into our low Earth orbit and mimic the sun. So, that is a little questionable. And then, in addition to that, a lot of we'll move on now to the idea of the hexagon itself, because a lot of these videos talking about the artificial sun, they point out how when you see it in the sky, it's reflecting in a hexagon pattern like a 6-point star. But you have to understand that there's a thing known as diffraction spiking, where due to the camera lens and the aperture settings, lines radiating from bright light sources in photographs, well, I just messed up that definition, but they are artifacts caused by light diffracting around the support vanes of the secondary mirror in reflecting telescopes or edges of non-circular camera apertures. So when you go down to, this is why like not even, in addition to the sun, depending on the camera, you can get a light on a bridge to look the exact same way that some people are showing the white sun to look like, and then claiming that it's artificial because of that. But that's not it. It is, you would have to look at their camera and what sort of lens they have, because different lenses will cause different, it'll cause different diffraction depending on what type of lens it is, right? And these are just regular lights. And you can see there's all kinds of different versions of it, depending on what camera's being used, the settings that are being used on it, so on and so forth. And that's why in the pictures that I took just with my shitty old iPhone 4, it's round, but there's none of that hexagonal stuff going on, because, well, I'd have to look at what, I did look at it, but I couldn't explain it to you what it means. iPhone 4S has um, a 4.28 millimeter focal length and a f/2.4 maximum aperture. So I would have to do further research into what sort of artifact that will create on a bright light source. But the one interesting thing about the whole issue of diffraction was I'm just going to play a little bit of this right here.
Just a particular object. For example, the Hubble Space Telescope has 4 struts that support its small secondary mirror, and their imprint causes the 4-pointed stars in Hubble photos. And I bet you can guess the shape of the aperture in the lens that took this picture. Similarly, the lenses of our eyes have subtle structural imperfections called suture lines, where the fibers that make up the lens meet. These imperfections leave a very particular imprint on light as it passes by, as researchers have confirmed by shining lasers in people's eyes. So even though stars themselves are just tiny round dots, by the time the light reaches our retinas, it's been smeared out into a star-like shape. Every single eye on Earth will see a slightly different star-like smear, depending on the exact nature of its suture lines. Even your own left and right eyes will differ. What's weird, though, is that any particular eye sees the same star shape for every star. So while it's actually scientifically acceptable to draw stars like this, if you draw more than one in a single picture, you better make sure they're all the same shape. On top of that, since diffraction spreads out longer wavelength red light more than bluer light, the arms of these star shapes are actually mini rainbows.
Okay, so that part is really interesting to me because I think this explains a little bit of the the color change and the difference in the pictures that we see now from the yellow sun to the white sun. If you see the okay, well, I guess I have to explain this. The reason that we see a like back when the sun was yellow, the reason that it would be a dark orange/red sunset and sunrise was because of the way those longer wavelengths refracted through the atmosphere. And now that the sun has shifted to a more ultraviolet color, like towards that part of the spectrum, the wavelengths are shorter, and me sorry, I struggle to explain this. So the images of the sun have these like shorter diffractions coming off of them because the wavelengths are shorter, and that's why the sunrise and sunset now is not as dark orange and red as it used to be. It's a much brighter version of that due to the overall shift that took place. So because these wavelengths are shorter and it's a brighter picture that you're getting, it leads to these like the photos we were seeing from space where those really bright stars had a similar diffraction taking place. Because when you go down to the yellow sun, it didn't seem to have a similar, because the wavelengths were longer, it didn't seem to have a similar spikiness to it, I guess is how, like the way, see, like, and going back to how you know this is fake and a painting is they're painting it exactly the way the sun looks now, like the way that the Hubble telescope takes a picture of a bright star like Sirius or something like that, how it has the 4 things as that video was just explaining, because of the way that its lenses are all set up. So you know this is not accurate because that's not how the satellites in space or any of their telescopes are designed. The telescopes are not designed to take this sort of picture. And then again, you go back to this video where they show, there you get the actual picture from where it's got this hexagonal pattern because of whatever, so you can even see the reflection of the lens. I mean, come on. So all that being said, I definitely don't lean towards the side of the sun being artificial because I think it's a very useful thing to consider. Like you got to consider all possibilities. It's a good thought experiment. But at the same time, you kind of got to ask yourself, like, if this is a natural phenomena that is inherently beneficial to us as far as um, our own conscious evolution, what better narrative would there be to spread around than, oh, that sun is artificial? You see what I'm saying? Um, that would be a very useful narrative to get some momentum behind. And that ties into all of these videos that talk about Nibiru and the second sun, and almost invariably all of those quote unquote anomalies are taken with the sun behind clouds. And the clouds now are metallic with nanoparticulate. So and you can find pictures of chembos and sundogs all over the place that people have taken because of the way that the light has to refract through this second atmosphere that they've created, right? Whenever there's trails laid down. So you can see how that whole narrative would play into this as well. And it's like, well, wait a second, what if none of that is actually accurate? And, this is just another narrative that is going to distract people from the absolute incredible, amazing time that we would be living through right now if this is actually the beginning of a shift of the cosmic seasons, as it were. What an incredible time to be alive. I mean, every time I look at the sun, I'm just, I'm totally amazed when I go outside. And like I said in another video, when I read the homeostatic equilibrium post, I was walking in a nature area not too long ago, and there was a clearing in the trees, and I had to do a double take because the lower underbrush and all those leaves, I thought there was snow on all of those leaves, and it hasn't snowed where I'm at in South Carolina like pretty much all year. And but I still thought that for a second, but because it was the reflection of this supernova sun on the leaves giving that illusion, right? And when you go outside on a clear day, man, it is incredible. And that goes back to the whole Blu-ray thing, where it's like reality has gone into high definition. All of the reflections have changed, and the perception of the objects itself has become crisper and I guess a little. Well, I don't know a better way to describe it than crisper. Right? It's just like it's sharper, maybe in the same way that in the same way that television has progressed. I went into a I randomly walked into a Best Buy the other day. I hadn't been in a store in so long like that, and there was this television. They've now upgraded to these curved televisions that I couldn't believe. Like it almost gave me vertigo watching it because the depth in the screen was so realistic, but yet fake at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but it was incredible. It was like this 70-inch curved, like curved in the middle. So the sides are pointing more towards you than the actual middle of it. Oh, and it was incredible. I couldn't believe how, like, I mean, you could see chapped lips like that looked realistic, like you were looking at a person in real life. So you can see how their technology is kind of mimicking this trend. Um, but but yeah, so I think there's something. I think there's something natural taking place here, and you know, maybe it's different. I have blue eyes, so I've had people tell me that that's the reason that I'm so sensitive to the sun. And when I try to tell them, this is the one subject that I actually talk to people about, and one person told me that, like, well, you have these really blue eyes. You're more sensitive to the light than I am, so maybe that's why you're thinking it's it's so white. And I'm like, oh man, I don't think so. Now, maybe in the context of the actual trend, I'm a little more sensitive than someone with brown eyes would be. Um, you know, just going back to that one video, which was talking about the differences in the way each eye of each individual perceives the diffraction of the stars, right? Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's just what a time to be alive, huh? Either way. Um, so I'll leave it there. But I'm encouraged that more people are talking about this, even if we're talking about it in the context of it being some artificial light source up there. It's good that more and more people are starting to notice, and I don't know how they couldn't notice because the thing looks like it's going supernova. But I'll leave it there.